So, welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where we're here to live a life of purpose, to be flourished and fulfilled in all areas of our life. I was just talking with Kirk, and this distinction hits home for me. It hits my heart because right when it was brought up into my awareness, I noticed how much this was actually inside of my life, and so awareness is the first battle, but how do you actually apply it? And it's the distinction of go deep, not wide. And so I'm really wanting to do that and to live my life on purpose. So, Kurt, can you bring the distinction and what it means to you?
Yeah, thank you. This distinction was born of um, discerning what I have my attention on when I'm leading and coaching. And so, one of the things I have my attention on is going deep in a subject or a world and language rather than wide. So, when when I first started creating classes, um, I had this uh, desire born of fear to try to introduce as many conversations as possible, as many different angles as possible to make my message receivable, which is valid, except that um, if you're using multiple conversations, if you're leading and you're trying to squeeze in a bunch of different ideas, a bunch of different distinctions, a bunch of different conversations, you don't really have the opportunity to go really deep. And the nature of this work is that you're trying to uncover something that's been hidden from you. A great example that I shared recently is we have this exercise in our visionary program called the interview. And this is something that I uh, um, first ran into about 20 years ago or so. But set up a you set up a conversation with someone who you trust, who you feel knows you well, and see things about you that you don't see, or possibly could see things about you don't see, like family members, best friends, people you spend time with. And you ask them a series. First of all, you create a super safe space because you're going to ask them questions that most people will have some resistance to answering. You're going to ask questions that might the person you're talking to might experience that as like if they answered, that's going to be bad news, or they're going to get in trouble, or they're going to upset you, or something. And so you got to create a super safe space where it's like the person you're interviewing really gets that this is a contribution to you, and you're going to use whatever they say as goal to increase your awareness of yourself and to upgrade yourself. And so in order to create that safe space, by the way, in case you're going to try it, you must first begin with yourself and make sure you're a clean space and ready to hear any opinion about you that someone has. And I recommend being a little thorough about that, because you might get surprised that, as I did, you might get surprised at what people tell you, and it could be easy to get triggered or get knocked off your center. So you're creating a safe space where you're going to ask somebody some questions, and the nature of the questions is how do you show up in the world? So how do they perceive you showing up in the world? And the idea is you interview, 10, 15, 20 people, as many as you want, and you get a really good awareness of how you're showing up in the world. And so I did this, and I was really excited about it, really inspired, and I was really surprised at what I got. So I interviewed the first person. I did the whole thing. I was like really excited and ready to hear whatever it was. And um, uh, um, uh, so they said a lot of great things about me, la 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 la. But then I said, okay, what about me doesn't work, for example? And what I got was, well, they were very timid, right? The first person, you're kind of arrogant. I was like, oh, I was like shocked. I was a little surprised. Like that never would have occurred to me. And kind of an asshole sometimes. Like, oh. Okay. So first one, I just laughed off. Like there's if you do 20 polls, if you if you ask 20 people the same question, you're going to get 20 different answers is what I had decided. And so I said, oh yeah, great, cool, 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 cool. And then the next interview, I got something very similar to exactly or very similar to arrogant asshole. And then out of 20 interviews, probably about 12 or 15 people said that. It's like, okay, so this is not an anomaly.
Okay, that
So
might
I
be something.
Yeah, they're right. I actually considered a possibility, right, that I was an arrogant asshole. And of course, laughing the whole thing off is exactly what an arrogant asshole would do, right? Like, oh, that's cute. That's not, oh, obviously that's not true, but whatever. So anyway, I got past all that and I really considered it. And it was a really transformational moment for me because it was something that I was not aware of. And I was committed to developing myself. I was committed to being something that I could really be proud of. And so I took it on and I, uh, really let in that at least some of the time I show up as arrogant, someone who knows everything, someone who's always got the answer, someone whose opinion they relate to is the truth. I'm sure everybody's met a bunch of people who have all these opinions, but the person with all the opinions doesn't relate to them as opinions. They relate to them as absolute truth and fact, right? So I was one of those. Oh my gosh. And being an asshole, yeah, I can totally get that. Back in the day, I was angry workaholic, so I have no doubt that got on people and showed up as an asshole, right? So upon reflection and opening up and being vulnerable and letting go of whatever resistance or shame or whatever I might have about that, it was like incredibly transformational. And so that started a journey of being someone who was learning how, at least, to be responsible for being arrogant and learning how to be responsible for showing up as an asshole. Because I actually don't want to show up as arrogant and as an asshole. Like it's not something that I want. So it was really amazing. So um, um, what's the prompt again? I got
Well, you
really
were
involved.
discussing about the interview and why it was so important, but the prompt is deep, going deep, not
Oh,
wide.
deep out wide. Perfect, perfect, perfect. So, thank you. I get wrapped up in my stories and programs sometimes. Go deep, not wide. So, um, that was an example of me going deep in something. Like it took 20 interviews, it took multiple conversations, lots of time, that kind of thing. I got assistance from people that I chose and trusted to tell me the truth. And I got something really amazing out of it. So had I gone shallow, maybe done one interview or two interviews, or done all the interviews and heard arrogant asshole and thought about it for 15 minutes or something, right? That would have been shallow and that would have absolutely made no difference. I would not be the person that I am today had I gone shallow rather than deep. So that's on the receiving end. On the giving end, I coach people and lead programs and create programs. Um, when I'm trying to make a difference with someone or creating a master class, leading or trying to make a difference, like leading a whole room or just talking individually to someone, it's very tempting to try one thing and then try another thing and then try another thing or try another thing. But shallow is really common. Like almost everybody all the time has a very shallow perception of the world. Like if you watch the news and you form your opinions from the news without vetting anything or actually getting a context, like when you watch the news, when you get information from the world, there's usually no context and it's usually manipulative by nature. Like when politicians speak, they have a particular thing they want you to believe. News organizations are run by companies and advertising, so there's absolutely an agenda. Whether you think that's a government agenda or a corporate agenda, for this conversation doesn't matter. There's always a slant. Like for example, when when we were going through the COVID thing and the vaccine thing, news articles were always in a singular direction. Vaccines good, COVID bad, uh, COVID like terminally dangerous, like crazy dangerous. I had COVID twice, and it was a bad cold. You know, it wasn't that big a deal. Vaccines good, and as it turns out, vaccines were not good. A lot of people are seriously injured by vaccines. But if you were getting your information from the news, you'd be getting this very shallow understanding of everything that is easily manipulated. If you were to go deep and actually find the scientists who did the original research, find sources of information that are not driven by by corporations or the government, um, you would get a much deeper understanding of what's going on. And so, living deeply rather than shallow is be at the source of your opinions. Start to understand why you think the things that you think, why you believe the things that you believe. Because most people, most of the time, believe whatever they've been told very often. Something that's known to be true in the field of marketing or propaganda is that to convince anybody of anything, it's a one-step recipe. It's very simple. It's just one step you have to do, and they just have to hear it a bunch of times. If you have any doubt about that, you could ask a young person out of a certain, set of universities or whatever, what is a woman? And they will tell you, well, whoever says they're a woman. But that's clearly ridiculous and clearly doesn't compute with common sense. Like it's just clearly ridiculous, right? Anybody who could think for a moment and go deep minus the thing they've been told 15,000 times, right? Could see, well, obviously men and women are different. They're not the same thing, and so forth and so on. So, but many people believe that a man is a woman simply if he declares he's a woman. Many people believe that if you put a man and a woman in an athletic situation, that they're equal. Like there's this whole thing about taking men out of women's sports, or no, men should be in women's sports, all the thing. But it's completely unfair to women that you would have men and women in almost every almost every sport. Men outperform women. I think there's a couple of sports where that's not true, but no woman would ever get a gold medal ever again if men were included in women's sports. So it's completely unfair. It completely lacks common sense. It's completely illusionary, and it's very shallow. So if someone were to look at the question, well, should men be in women's sports? Even if you were told 1,000 times that this is a good idea, and this is fair, and this is equity, and this is whatever, inclusion or whatever, if you were to let all that go and go deep for a few moments, you would see the truth of the matter. And so um, um, and so going deep is very rare. The depths are where the wisdom resides. Uh, Shallow is where egoic manipulation resides, because if you're not at the source of whatever you believe or whatever you're up to, you're easily steered and manipulated and taken advantage of. If you understand what you're doing, why you're doing it, what works, what doesn't work. In other words, if you go deep, you actually are a centered human being who is very likely to perform under in an adverse environment. Like you could walk into a room where everybody tells you something is crazy, and you can just go, no, actually, thank you for your opinion. I love that you have that opinion, but I'm gonna stick with the truth. Appreciate it. And so there's that, and then I'll finish up with um, in leading an event for like purpose, for example, right? If we in this, roughly probably 45 minutes that we're going to be together, so if we tried to cover 15 topics, oh, this is a good one. This is my favorite topic right here. This is a great conversation. Da 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 da. I'd literally have like 2 or 3 minutes for each one, but we're literally just going deep on one thing. And our intention and my intention is to take this one thing and go as deeply as you can, so I'll pause there and let's see where we are.
Um, I've been hearing a lot inside of this as well. One with the interview, I just want to bring that is I heard love on a whole different level.
Mm.
I feel like I witnessed that love is not what we want. It's about hearing the uncomfortable things, and it requires change and an evolution. It's like to look at the hard things, to look at the things where we're like, I really don't want to reflect that,
Mhm.
and with the deep and not wide conversation, I'm sitting here with feelings even with myself. I'm like, wow, I've actually made some moves to control or to feel safe and pick some things that maybe even weren't for my best or even the team's best. And I'm like, oh man, like, so I've been sitting with that, with this realization and these things, but I'm also sitting with how cool that I can change it.
Mm.
So I'm really glad that you had that all wrapped up in there, because I'm like, whoa, I could have taken myself right down that rabbit hole, but I decided not to. And so uh, you had mentioned with going deep and not wide, saying don't throw the kitchen sink at someone.
Yep.
Can you distinguish what that means?
That's a phrase that I might be dating myself, I don't know, but, throwing the kitchen sink is like bringing everything you can. It's going shallow, it's going wide, well, I wanna talk about purpose, so I wanna talk about leadership for example, say leadership. And let's say different aspects of leadership, divine leadership, um, leadership could be following the divine, like going first and following the divine. Leadership could, be the first in confronting dysfunction. Leadership could be really great at creating channels. I think we talked about channels in another episode. There's all sorts of things you could talk about leadership. And each one of those aspects of leadership and many more um, could be a whole journey, a whole book, a whole multiple week, like a whole weekend course or something. Like to go to the very source, like to the very depth, the very bottom of what it is to be a leader, and cover all the aspects of it. In the visionary program, the first one is 12 weeks. The second one is 12 weeks. There's going to be a third one. That's 12 weeks. That's 36 weeks. Every week has, 5 to 6 conversations in there. Um, you can't squeeze that into a conversation or a single master class and get anything done. Nothing positive is gonna come from that. People are gonna hear some cute phrases. They're gonna have a aha moment or two. They'll smile. They go, "Oh, I understand that. Oh, that's really great." But they didn't have a chance to not just understand something, but to get at the source of it, to feel it, to see where that's present or absent in their life, to see where they've, in the absence of awareness of this conversation, that they've caused all kind of extra work and trouble and pain and suffering in their lives. And they could see a whole new future that if they implemented this idea into their life, like, oh my gosh, it could be this and it could be that and it could be this. And then you can start to contemplate the impact that it's had on other people in your life. And then you can start to contemplate the idea of sharing something that you can see that this dysfunction has impacted the people in your life that you love, and you could then go to like, well, how can I give this beautiful gift that I love so much to people that I love so that they too can, and just on, like it could just go on for just on and on and on and on. So that's where the gold is. That's where the wisdom is that actually has a shot at giving you a future that you've never seen before. Like I never thought, like there was a time of like for the whole first half of my life, I never thought I would be this person. I never thought I'd be a person of character. I never thought I'd be successful. I never thought I'd be a contribution. I never thought I would amount to much. I just was hoping I would survive. Um, um, I never knew love. Um, I never knew what it was to be a real contribution in the world, like to actually be the solution, be the change I wanted to see, get what I wanted to get. Like I didn't have an awareness of any of that, and if I did, I definitely didn't see myself as that person. And then here I am. It's through years of inspired commitment and action, getting myself trained to be a leader, leading, for 20 years, like leading events kind of, pretty much regularly for 20 years. Now I'm leading a couple events a week. And um, it's just, I'm just going deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper and deeper. And from that, everything I've always wanted and everything that I've never even imagined, like I have so much abundance. It's almost uncomfortable. Like I just never thought I'd be this person. And it's all a function of being interested in the wisdom and the truth, that which truly makes a difference. I grew up with a mother who was not well and was highly narcissistic, like highly, highly narcissistic. And so the world that I grew up in as a child just lacked anything good or beautiful or deep. Like, when you live with a narcissist, every moment is in service of that ego. So there's no beautiful future, there's no deep intimate connection, there's no sharing feelings, there's no being on the same team, there's no being aligned. You're either being taken from or you're resisting being taken from. And that's it. That's all there is. And so I was really interested in, like, I didn't feel like a complete human being. Like, it took me a while to notice that, but I didn't really, I don't know how so this is like beyond my ability to distinguish. So I'm just going to say a few words and hope just a bookmark it, I guess. But it took me a while to realize, but I didn't have the experience that I actually existed. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but I more had the experience that I was in a movie and I was the main character. Everyone else in my life was supporting cast, and I was trying to direct the movie in the way that I wanted it. But I didn't actually feel like a real human being amongst other human beings, like all trying to figure out this crazy thing called life together. Like that wasn't like that. And I can hear the narcissism in that. So it's definitely, where I came out of, like that was how life was. That was how my mother was. She just used people and that's all there was. And I grew up in a world where that's what it was, right? And so once I had an experience of something else, and for me that was the Landmark Forum in 1996, mind blown. Like I started to feel like a real human being, and I started to see that I could actually have a positive impact on other human beings, and I started to see that there was a future. Like the forum leader spoke in such a way that I wanted to be that. I wanted to be able to talk like that. I wanted to be able to hear like that. I wanted to be able to see like that. I wanted to be able to speak and have people be set free. Like I was just blown away and completely taken by that. And at some point I realized that the recipe is going deep. Like, what kind of communication is that? And somebody gives you an answer. Well, tell me more about that, and tell me more about that. And the way that forum leader spoke, it took me years and years and years to fully distinguish, oh, that's how that's done. It wasn't a 5-minute conversation. It wasn't a 6-month course. It took me years of practice and discerning before I realized, oh, I got it. I got it. And so now I too can speak like that. I can, I understand and feel and have experienced and practiced for many and trained and practiced for many years how that kind of communication works. And that only that kind of capacity, as far as I know, only comes from a deep commitment, like a real commitment to go deep and get at the source of the thing. And sometimes that's easy, and sometimes it takes years or decades.
Yeah. I I feel like I'm in a very vulnerable state right now. Um, I've been going through a very real transition in my life about like not having to speak right when the thing's coming up, you know, and I had a really real experience for me yesterday during one of our meetings. And I'm sitting on my hands and I'm like, I don't think I should say this right at this moment because I'm highly triggered and I'm like wanting to confront the dysfunction that was happening in the space and just really feeling it. One, there was like people being dismissed, uh, like trying to control and compete in the space, and I'm witnessing all of these things, and it's really alive, like rude and aggressive and angry and all these things, and I'm sitting with it, and I'm like, oh man. But the thing is that I'm lit up, you know,
That,
I'm really going through all of this and like
that,
felt like an unsupported and unsafe. And I'm like, well, because you're freaking being, if you were to unleash right now, you would be unsafe and unsupportive. And I'm like, man, that's difficult. That's difficult to sit with at times, but I'm really glad that I was able to bring the awareness to it. But bringing this vulnerability with the intention of I want to be done with that and love it, you know, and love that part of myself for it to be healed. So for the people that are watching, I want to do it real time, you know, like this is alive for me. This is real and what's going on, and I want to confront that dysfunction within myself so I can bring healing to the world, you know, and that our decisions matter and that I make an impact with my brothers and sisters here. So is there anything, Kirk, that you see, because I trust you, that to share with me what could be my next step in this? And
yeah, well, I also have a lot of energy in me, and I feel a lot, and when things are happening, I see a lot and I feel a lot, and um, mostly I don't respond and don't speak. Um, um, yeah, if unless something requires it for some reason, and there could be a lot of different reasons, I don't move if I'm triggered. I don't move if I need something to be a certain way. I don't move if I'm angry with someone and want to teach somebody a lesson. Those are all very familiar feelings for me, like a lifetime of familiar feel patterns, familiar feelings. And I have observed so many times making a big mess when I indulge my desires to teach someone a lesson, however subtle that might be or not be. Um, and so that really came home when I had a few conversations here at the village over the years that did not go the way I wanted, and I can see that the source of it was me being reactive inside the conversation rather than being responsible. And so for me, it was observing a heavy price many times. What is for me a heavy price? An important conversation not being heard, an important commitment not being fulfilled. That's a heavy price for me. And I consider that a failure, given that I'm a leader and a trainer and all that kind of stuff. I'm okay with failure. I'm not condemning, well, I'm convicting myself, not condemning myself. So if it's a loss, that's a loss. I write it up there loud and proud and that kind of thing. And then I've used that to I've used the pain and the suffering that I went through on those occasions to remind me to first of all continue to go to work on clearing my heart, healing myself, so that the reactivity is less and less and less. And about many things about which I used to be reactive, there's nothing there, like this, nothing there. And some things, there's still something there, right? So if there's still something there, that's my responsibility. If, like, uh, an example of something there is, we have this incredibly beautiful village, and we have this, driveway, which is our walkway through the village. But every time our property manager does a project with concrete, he mixes the concrete on the driveway and doesn't clean it up. So we've got all these, concrete marks, some of them, like a half inch above, like you have to like kind of walk. It's like, it's a big eyesore for me. And it looks to me like disrespect. It looks to me like someone's treating our beautiful home like a construction site, right? And I've had 15 to 20 conversations using every strategy that I know, big, small, friendly, hard, like all the different things. And every time, yeah, 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 yeah. And he did it again today. So there's something there for me that pisses me off, right? I want to go teach that man. I want to go have a conversation with him from which he can never ever forget to make sure he cleans up his mess, right? So I I don't do that. I don't go light him up. I don't go teach him a lesson. Um, there have been times when I had nothing going on about it, and I really felt an open space to go have a conversation with him. And I was able to do that open-heartedly. And he acted like he didn't know what I was talking about. So I thought, okay. So I had to exit because I'm, to me, that's like, to the old me, that's like, okay, time to light him up, So I didn't do that, right? Because that just makes a big mess. He gets all anxious and fearful, and he performs less well because now he's afraid of me. I'm gonna, whatever, So yeah, so that'd be an example of me having stuff there. So it's my job to keep inquiring into that and getting at the source of what that is until it's completely healed. So that job's not complete yet. So there's some things, there's lots of things about which I have complete freedom. There's still a few things in which I'm a little bit constrained in my judgment, like I have trigger and judgment and distortion. One of the things I say is when you're triggered, your vision is distorted, your perception is distorted. So I still have distortion and all that kind of stuff. So I let other team members who don't have that about that particular thing go handle that particular thing. And I'm not abdicating on my responsibility. Well, first of all, that is me being responsible. Like, hey, I'm I'm not the one for that. You don't want to be involved with that. And then I'm still being responsible for continuing my healing, which has, made a huge difference over the years. So, um, the other thing is, I noticed that my conclusions or my judgment that this is bad is often premature. So oftentimes when things don't look the way I think they should look, I very quickly and unconsciously conclude that this is wrong. Right. And so, I catch myself often. I don't know if I catch myself all the time, because if you don't catch yourself, you don't notice it. That's the nature of not catching yourself. But I do catch myself in judgment. And when I catch myself in judgment, I turn that off. Okay.
Mhm.
Like, okay, let me look again. Let me open up my heart further. You know, um, let me open up my mind further. Let me just pause for a minute. Maybe stop thinking about it for a minute, come back to it tomorrow, or just, whatever will assist me in centering myself in this deepest truth that I can access. And then from there, what I notice is I'm a lot wiser. I'm a lot more supportive. People hear me much more deeply. And the team around me gets stronger. And that's a big part of my responsibility here, is the development of all the teams, especially the leadership team, which now way more than half the time, 80-90% of the time, the team does all the speaking instead of me. There was a time when I did all the speaking because there was no team.
Mm.
all the confronting of dysfunction and all the coaching and all that kind of stuff. And then so now I hardly do any of it. And that is one of my greatest, if you ask me what one of my greatest successes is, it would be that my team is able to, or our, the team is able to outperform what I was once doing, which is exactly how it should be. Right. And my opinion is the team's just getting started. We're just coalescing and getting grounded, and the future is so much brighter than the present, and the present is brighter than anything I've ever seen.
It's true.
You being one of the key examples of the team that I'm referring to.
Thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. Believe me, the pleasure was all mine.
I know.
Finally, they showed up. I've been waiting forever. And that's actually true. I've literally been waiting and preparing for the team. And then they show up one by one, and oftentimes they're very well disguised.
Yeah.
When they first show up, you don't realize they're going to be
Like, no, no.
Hey, Kirk, I want to introduce you to your next superstar. Can we have a bribe? Can we?
God, we need to have a conversation real quick.
That's good. You stay there, and you come over. Let's.
That's so true. With what you were sharing, and I might have come up with a conclusion for myself. I put it in the Dysfunction Junction chat, and I had said, I'm going to get the plank out of my eye. I shared that with the group, because they were like, what's going on? Like, my body language you can't hide that,
Yes.
So I'm like, you can see it all over me,
Yes.
And they're like, what's going on? You look incomplete. And I'm like, yes, I am.
Yes.
And they're like, well, do you want to share it? I'm like, no, I don't, because I want to get the plank out of my eye. And then I went back and I wrote in the chat and I said I hid, and I didn't. I don't think I did actually, but I did write that in the chat, saying that I hid from them to share my emotions and to share my vulnerability of where I'm at. But I think I might have concluded that wrong, because I don't want to follow my emotions. But there is something that I am currently going through, and that's allowing myself to fall in to my feminine. Mm-hmm. But I think I've got a distortion around all that going on, because I think I'm identifying with the crazy, and the emotions, thinking that that's all the feminine, and maybe it's just talking about the vulnerable, talking about the emotions and not spewing them on people, and so I really appreciated that awareness that you gave, because it gives me time to respond, to talk about what it is that was actually coming up, what was coming alive for me, and not throwing that at someone. And so I'm kind of going through that whole scenario, because I'm like, well, when's a good time? And are we supposed to be raw and real? And and
I'm feeling raw and real. How about you?
Yeah, I'm like, we're being. I'm like, I can give it to you right now, Oh man, but that comes from a wounded space, and I'm seeing that now. Like, it comes from the space of like thinking that I need to interject or save the underdog, or like, hey, don't say that. I'm like, wow, I think the biggest impact that you had on me recently was when you shared, you've got a lot of people that are here that have a background that you don't know about, and they're hurting, and we have no clue what they've gone through to get here, but they're here, and so I'm focusing on healing that part. And I'm really glad that I just saw that awareness to do that for myself, and that I didn't really hide. I shed. I'm like, yeah, I'm incomplete. Yeah, I'm doing all that. But also there's a second part, I think, to that. And that's bringing it to the group about speaking about my emotions. So how do you recommend doing that? You know, like I don't even know.
Um, so, yeah, one of the key moments in someone's transformation, um, Eckhart Tolle speaks about this incredibly beautifully. One of the key movements in transformation is when you begin to observe that which you thought you were. So initially, I thought that internal voice in my head was me thinking,
Mhm.
and then at some point, well, actually, it was the transformational weekend. It was the Lamont Forum. I saw the internal dialogue as an internal dialogue, as the voice of my ego, and then I noticed that something else was observing that. And the question becomes, what's the something else that's observing the ego? It's not the ego. It's something observing the ego. And as you start to identify with the observer rather than the ego, you start to have power with the ego. You start to have power with your emotions. You start to have power with your opinions and conclusions and your fears and your judgments, because you start to go, oh, rather than that is wrong, that's wrong is very different than, wow, I'm really judging that. It's a completely different space. That's wrong is going to likely promote fear, anxiety, reaction, making a big mess. Oh, I have judgment about that tends to point in the direction of healing and responsibility, right? And
Yeah.
actually from a conscious space that's not completely distorted, perhaps even resolving the issue. Reaction rarely resolves anything. Responding often does. So I think the most powerful thing I can share about that is, first, if you haven't experienced being the observer, really let this idea in. Observe your thoughts and then notice that mostly your thoughts are just that voice that's been talking to you your whole life. And then consider that that's not you thinking. That's something else. And the something else that is your ego speaking. And then notice that you're observing your ego. Therefore, you and your ego are actually separate.
Hmm. So if you're not the voice talking, you're the one that's listening to it.
Yes.
Yeah. I just keep hearing you say, out, slow the darkness, slow down. Just slow down real quick. If you haven't seen that episode, I highly recommend it. It's Out, Slow the Darkness. It's a beautiful distinction. And yeah, so going deep internally to all of those things is going to give you access to freedom.
A beautiful thing to go deep in as a result of this podcast. Like if somebody wanted like a prompt, like an exercise prompt or something like that, it would be practice going deep in being the observer. I promise there's profit there that you cannot even imagine. By profit, I mean you'll be very happy that you did that. You will think that what you experience on the inside and what you're able to produce on the outside will be far beyond your imaginings as you go deep and master this thing called observing your ego, being the observer.
Like, have you like, is that like journal prompting and just watching yourself as it happens, or is
Um,
it just awareness practice?
it wasn't for me, so I don't have a specific answer to that. For me, it was just listening for that over time, like just really looking, like just really noticing, because you have lots of opportunities. That voice is happening all the time, so literally all day you could practice observing your. People call it observing your thoughts, so you could call it that, but it's rarely thinking. It's mostly just that monologue. There is something called thinking that we discuss that another time, but this monologue that happens isn't you and it isn't you thinking. And so there's a lot of opportunity to practice. So for me, it would just be simply noticing when that voice is running away. Like, blah, 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 like getting louder, like getting pissed off about something, like, oh, there you are. Okay, I remember now. That's not me thinking. Phew, because that guy's a jerk. I'm glad that's not me. And then you can start to observe it and then release the judgment and release the fear and judgment that that it's talking to you about. And then it becomes possible to see the world a little differently outside of that constant narrative about how messed up everything is or everybody is.
Yeah. I'm also going to place inside of the description box for those that are watching the questions to the interview process. So if you want to go deep with your family, with your coworkers, with people that you trust, and you want to go deep in your life about how do they actually even think about me? Like what do they actually think? Most of the time we're caring about what we think that they think rather than actually caring about that. So um it was a really powerful process for me to witness and got a lot of gold out of that. And I'm going to continue doing that this week as well. So that'll be in the description box. Same with resources and ways that you can get a hold of us, the Visionary Leadership 4.0. And as Kirk said, there's another one that's coming up that we haven't even embarked on. So if you want to go on that journey and ride with us, that's also going to be in the description box below. Thank you, Kirk. I appreciate you. And thanks for going deep and into this conversation so I can bring this to my life and apply it. So
My pleasure. My pleasure.
thanks, everyone.